Good morning, everybody. Welcome to ASCP's podcast, Our Experience. I'm Chad Wers, Chief Executive for ASCP, alongside my tag team partner, Tom Hansel of Hansel Health. And we are here on this holiday week, 4th of July week, to talk to Will Hallett. And the description for this particular podcast starts out with Chad fancies himself the quintessential consultant pharmacist, and having worked as a consultant pharmacist my whole career, I do fancy myself a consultant pharmacist, and like to believe I was an interesting one when I was doing it full time. But I met Will Hallett and realized that he has a passionate ability to stand up and explain exactly what we as consultant pharmacists do. In fact, one of, I think, my early good decisions as CEO was having Will come up and speak to the National Minority Quality Forum Summit, where he got to be in front of a bunch of Beltway bureaucrats and Congress people and talk about what we do, because especially at that time, and maybe a little less now that we've gone through the pandemic, most people don't know what we do. And Will does an awesome job of describing it. So welcome, Will. Thanks for being here.
Hey there, Chad. Thank you so much. Tom, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys.
Yeah, so let's jump into it, Will. Let's just talk. Let's go back to your origin story. We like to talk about origin stories to start. How'd you get here? Where'd you come from?
So where did I come from? Born and raised on Long Island, and my dad was a funeral director. My mom was a nurse, so I sort of saw life and death every day.
Oh, wow.
Which was pretty interesting. I saw how my dad dealt with people in some of the worst moments of their lives and their loved ones' lives, and I saw my mom, with that compassion. And I thought to myself, I think I want to stay on the living side of things. I would prefer it if I stayed on this side. But from whatever reason, from a very, very early age, I had this fascination with why and how drugs worked. I can remember my brother saying to me, I was taking an Alka-Seltzer. I was a little kid. I probably shouldn't have been taking an Alka-Seltzer. We know better now. But I'm a kid. I've got an upset stomach. I'm taking an Alka-Seltzer. And he says to me, don't take that too much. It's not going to work after a while. And I started pondering that as like little 7-year-old me, like, is that really the way that works? Am I going to, like the word tolerance, I had no idea, but that's what's running through my little 7-year-old brain. And that sort of set me down this road. Now, my grandfather, my mother's father, was a pharmacist, and his father before him was a pharmacist. They had come from Italy, and they emigrated in the late 1800s. So there was this air of pharmacy that was sort of surrounding me, and I was always kind of interested. Came time to choose colleges, and saw St. John's University was right nearby us, and they had a program, and I put in for it and was luckily accepted. Best thing that ever happened to me. I had no idea that I would love it as much as I possibly do. Chad, when I tell you that I can't imagine doing anything else with my life, I really mean that. It's been my life's passion to do what I do, and to do it in a long-term care environment is made it only better for me. So it's sort of been an interesting road to becoming a pharmacist. What happened after that? Well, that's a longer story too. So. So if you guys got a question, please, jump in.
No, go
Chad,
ahead. I want to hear the longer story. What happened after that?
You know me well. I'll go on for a bit because it really is. This is a life's passion, like yours, Chad. And Tom, even from speaking to you, I can hear it in your voice as well. I love it when I'm talking to some of the younger pharmacists and I hear that passion in their voice. It's like, yes, there we go. Next generation grabbing it, the same way that I did. And I remember people inspiring me from ASCP. Along the way, by some fortune, Chad, I became, and Tom, I became a hospital pharmacist fairly quickly out of school. I worked in a chain for a little bit, went back to some guys that I had done one of my rotations under, begged them for a job in the hospital where I'd done a rotation. They kindly took me back and moved up through the ranks, went to another hospital where at the ripe old age of 26, 27, I found myself director of pharmacy. Stunning. I shouldn't have been there. It was just a confluence of things. Had to learn really fast how to manage a staff, how to, how to hire people, how to, get prepared for surveys like JACO and the whole bit. And by 28, 29, I'm looking, say, well, now what do I do? Where's the career path? What do I do? Just go to a bigger hospital? There's got to be some career path. And just about that time, one of the local nursing homes, so local to the hospital, calls up the hospital pharmacy, gets me on the phone and says, hey, listen, we need a consultant pharmacist. You've got a staff. Is anybody there? Could they come by and do some work for us part-time? I said, well, let me see what this is about. I had no idea. I didn't even know the world of consultant pharmacy existed at that point. No idea of OBRA guidelines, nothing. So I go over there and I talk to them, and it dawned on me fairly quickly that if you were ethical and conscientious and you were willing to take the time to build the bridges with the nurses, with the medical staff, with the administration, man, could you make a difference? There were so many opportunities, simple opportunities, to fix things on behalf of this population of people that were so desperately in need. This was our frail elderly, and they needed somebody to come in, and not as a brilliant clinician, just with some common sense and with a focus on this one particular area, and help them out. Chad, when I tell you one of the first units that I walked on, it was a 50-bed unit. And I remember counting it up. There were 32 people on a long-acting benzodiazepine for sleep, long off the market. It's called Dalmane, flurazepam, long off the market, and it should be off the market. And so 32 out of 50 people were on, and I'm looking at this saying, well, this is wrong. And it took time to sort of get there. So what did I do? I looked, I talked to them, I said, I think there's a career here. I think not only is there a career here, there's an opportunity. I could probably do this for a bunch of facilities. And I'll bet you I could sort of get this merry band of other pharmacists, and we could all sort of put our heads together, and we could do this for a lot of facilities and really make a difference. So in fairly short order, believe it or not, I quit my job. My wife went out on maternity leave. My daughter was born, and I started the company with one little 100-bed nursing home in the middle of Queens, New York, and launched basically everything from there. I took every part-time job in whatever pharmacy I could to make ends meet while I sort of built the company. Now, that was 32 years ago, and looking back, it worked. Sort of that vision, that I had in my head, that's where I'm sitting today. I've got this wonderful, unbelievable staff of 95 pharmacists who work for me these days. And I say that it should be the reverse. I really work for them. I work every day to make sure that they have the tools to go out and do a good job. So I work with this unbelievable team, one better than the next. And we do this for over 400 facilities up and down the East Coast. And mostly, you can hear it in my voice, I'm just a guy having a good time. I love what I do. We're making a difference. I got to marry basically two passions that I had. I was always interested in business, and I loved being a clinical pharmacist, and I get to do both every single day. How lucky am I?
That's awesome. I mean, there's about 8 things that you said that I want to follow up on, but I'm going to try to figure out where to go first. First I'm going to say I love your origin story about the starting of your consulting company, because that's one experience that I also had. I started my company July 1st, and we had our first child July 26th. And if there's one piece of advice I can definitively say will help you in your career, it's start a business at the most critical time of your life, because nothing drives you like a mouth to feed, and you're going to succeed because of that. Now, obviously, not that doesn't happen to everybody, but I think that's interesting because it did drive me. I do look at that moment and I'm like, what was I thinking? quit my
Yeah, no,
job, start a business, have a kid in a month.
Right.
But it drives you.
yeah, these become these now or never moments.
Right.
You sort of look at it and say, okay, let's go. And then it becomes sink or swim moments. When you figure out, how to not sink, maybe not swim so well, but not sink, that sense of accomplishment that you get from that, and knowing that you're doing something good and is worthwhile and you're building towards something, there's nothing like it. Also making sure the mouths are fed, well, there's nothing like that either. So I get you completely.
Well, and I think that's it. I think the take-home message that I tell people that want to get into this line of work is you can't be afraid to take that step. Your situation can be far worse. It could be far better, but take the risk. You'll figure out how to not, I like the way you put it, not sink. Because that's ultimately the driver is, it's not desperation, but you have no other choice. You've committed to this path. So, all right. The second thing I want to follow up on, and you kind of touched on it, being a hospital pharmacist and being a director of pharmacy, but what advice would you give young people maybe coming out of school or leaving an environment of pharmacy that they don't like? I know retail takes a lot of hits right now. What's the advice that you give somebody? How do you hire? If somebody comes to you and says, Will, I want to work for you.
All right. So, it's really, really interesting. There's a couple of things in there that you touch on, but I'm going to hit the last one that you just brought up on how do you hire. So it's really funny. The hiring process, there are certain things that you're looking for, and there are certain things that are unteachable. Like, I can teach anybody the regulations. Look, we were all smart enough to get into and out of pharmacy school. And the entrance requirements these days are so incredibly high. The students that we take in right now, they are great. I mean, these are really, really bright, good, young professionals. I'm so proud of what I'm seeing coming out of the pharmacy schools right now. But I will tell you, when it comes to hiring, there's actually a couple of things that I'm looking for. You can't teach work ethic. You can't. So you look for somebody that generally wants, it's just a doer. That's an absolute. Second, you can't teach somebody to be diplomatic. So in the course of interviewing somebody, very generic questions about, how they've handled various things. And, it seems all very conversational, but I'm actually looking for how measured are people's responses? Because now remember what we're doing as consultant pharmacists. We're going to look at the chart. And we are going to look at that drug order and say, we're going to politely tell the doctor in very professional terms that they're not quite as right as they could have been, which is a very, very diplomatic way of telling them they were wrong, right? So again, there are levels of all of that, and what you want to do is you want to do this in the polite diplomatic measure, because you could be wrong about them being wrong, because they may be sitting on facts that you have no idea of. Because they're examining flesh and blood, and they may know that person for 20 years. So telling somebody in this very polite diplomatic way that you think they're not quite as right as they could have been, and then you getting the response, you've built that collegial relationship with them. And what's happening now is you're learning from them, because they're going to come back and they're going to push back and say, no, I don't think so, and here's why. And now you build your knowledge base. And that benefits everybody. So you can't teach diplomacy skills. I can't teach work ethic. I can't teach somebody to love the clinical aspects of pharmacy. Now, remember, all pharmacists are not the same, and thank goodness, right? We need people that really want to be behind the bench, that love being behind the bench, that love, they feel very productive, and, that's their day, go in, do their work behind the bench and get those drugs out to people, and they're good at it. And thank goodness. And they pick up on those things, they pick out those prescriptions that would have gone out wrong, and they fix them. And thank goodness, right? There are other people that, like me, I would be a terrible bench pharmacist, terrible. Because I just, my mind is looking at the drugs, and I'm thinking about all these other things, and I'm not focusing the way a good bench pharmacist needs to. I need somebody that loves the clinical aspects the way I love the clinical aspects. That's going to help them be a good consultant pharmacist. But here's the last one. And this is actually as critical as the other three combined. Hire happy. Find people that want to be happy. and hire them. You get a bunch of happy people together, you know what you're going to have? You're going to have a really happy group that loves what they do. You've hired people that are ethical, they have they're conscientious, they have a work ethic, they're diplomatic by nature, and they're happy. Oh man, you can create quite a team there
Yeah.
with that. You take one unhappy person and you mix that into the same group, and what do you got? A bunch of unhappy people. I don't care how talented you are as a pharmacist. If you're not, like, I look for a natural smile as I'm interviewing people. Are you naturally happy? Do you want to be happy? Because there are people that, no matter what terrible thing is going on in their life, they're determined. They're going to make the best of it. Those are the kinds of people that I want to be around, and that's the kind of person I want to be for those other people,
Yeah.
to help them get there.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I mean, basically what you're saying is it's really about relationships. And when you are, you mentioned dealing with the doctors and politely saying, maybe you're not as right as you think you are. I've been there a few times. I decided in my career, though, that I wasn't going to be happy as a clinician or behind the bench, so I went into management. I figured that's the thing that's going to make the one thing that I can handle. But this is a relationship business. You could, I guess, as a pharmacist, come across harsh or like it all, and the doctors are going to do the opposite. They're not going to accept your recommendations. They're going to pull back, and the whole thing falls apart on the consulting side. So I love what you talk about as far as relationships. How do you continue to build? It's you doing it one-on-one, you hiring happy people, but now I know your business is spread across many states. And so how do you make sure that you continue to grow, but keep that personal relationship, keep that personal touch?
So, is there a lot there. So a lot of it is about the regional people that you put in place and making sure that you're meeting with them on a regular basis, and you are there to support them, and you're there at the critical meetings they need you to be a part of. They're meeting with a regional nurse. They're meeting with, they've got, other big things coming up. You're either on there with them or, involved in making sure that, they've been coached up to the need to what they need to be coached up on, or they've at least had a chance to talk these things through with you and say, okay, listen, this is what I'm planning to present. A lot of it is just those team building and management skills that all sound like cliches, but they're not. Being there and making sure that you're supporting the people that you've put in charge to make sure that, the Southeast is being handled properly, that the Mid-Atlantic is being handled properly. And that, to me, that's a tremendous amount of fun. And it brings it back to another key aspect that all pharmacists need to realize while they're still in school, before they even graduate. In one way, shape, or form, you will be a manager. You need to understand how to be a good boss, what you need to do, because even if you are just a singular pharmacist working in a singular store in a small town, you've got a tech, you've got other people that are relying on you to give them guidance, to give them support, to help them be successful, to help them feel good about the work that they're doing. So every pharmacist should be thinking, even as they're coming through school, all right, I've worked for people. How was I treated? How would I like to be treated? What do I need to do, like, if I was in that position? And just be thinking it forward. So you take those very same skills that may be very micro on that level, and you just apply them to the macro. So now I'm doing it just sort of on a larger scale. What I like to say right now is, on any given day, I'm in the state that I need to be in order to support the people that I need to support at that particular moment. So I kind of look at it that way. Yeah, hopefully that makes some sense to you, Tom.
I'm going to go back to your comment about hiring happy people, because I think the downstream effect of that is, if you're a happy person, people want to work with you. People are going to listen to you. That communication aspect, I used to say something similar when hiring was, I'm not looking for the most brilliant 4.0 student that came out of pharmacy school. I'm looking for the pharmacist that can communicate with the cantankerous doctor that doesn't want to listen, to the family member, to the nurse at the nurse's station. It's a challenge to be able to have the breadth to be likable and to be communicative to a broad range of people. And that's what really to me, makes the difference in a consultant pharmacist, and it speaks to everything you just said about their ability to manage situations, to be able to manage regional people, local people, and again, the people that they deal with every day. I think that's really important. Now, part of that, and I want to touch on this, is coming out of the pandemic. We're in an interesting place as a consulting pharmacist group. We have the draw of doing things off-site. A lot of people were able to do things off-site with electronic records. We're at an environment where most of our SNFs are understaffed and struggling. When I look at those two things, I have different opinions. Those are two different topics, really. But the staffing one in particular, I just smell opportunity when I see an understaffed nursing facility. What else can I solve for you? What else can I do for you? And how can I turn that into being part of my business? How are you looking at these staffing issues, and how do you work with your team to help solve problems for nursing homes?
At the beginning of the pandemic, we looked at the fact that there just was no staff. Staff was either out or they were quitting, and it was very quickly turning into a crisis of, can we even get the meds administered?
Yeah.
And what can we do? The corollary to that was, what can we do to protect the nurses that are there from getting sick? And that meant trying to minimize ins and outs of rooms, and particularly with people that had already contracted COVID and things like that. And what we did basically right from the beginning was we went back to our database of recommendations and sort of coalesced, and I put together something that we called 8 actions prescribers can take right now to minimize med pass burden. And we sold it basically, and I really mean sell. I spoke to every medical staff that would listen to me. I recorded, things like this. We did web broadcasts. Every group that I could get to listen, I'm like, look, here's 8 different things that you can do right now that will minimize the nurses having to go in and out of rooms, minimize the med pass burden, and streamline things so that the nurses can safely get the medications administered and appropriately get the medications administered. And what I would talk to the medical staff was about, look, we're going to write all these things in drug regimen review. I am begging you, beat us to the punch. Mm-hmm. Do it before we even get there. Mm-hmm. You've got to look at all those finger sticks that you're doing that basically, you've already proven the point. You know exactly where they are. The hemoglobin A1C is telling you everything you need. You've got all the information. There's no reason to be sticking this person as often as you are. And we'd bring them back to data that was developed out of ASCP on how long one single finger stick with coverage takes. And the number of minutes involved there, and you'd see the eyes get wide open. So we leverage information that came out of ASCP in some of the talks that we were doing. We talk about the excess blood pressures. We talk about people that had dry eyes back in December of 2017, and they're still on artificial tears. Yeah. So it was all of these things, that we were looking at, and that had a big impact. The very interesting thing that I really think came out of that was by taking sort of a leadership role and trying to get out there, my phone rang more than ever with people saying, yeah, no, we really, really need some help. And you talk about, where the opportunities come from. The opportunity comes from getting out and doing the right thing and making sure that you're basically not saying, well, this is only for people that I serve. So many of the things that I put out there, Chad, where basically I said, listen, you distribute this to anybody that needs it. We are all in this together. Yep. Now more than ever going through COVID. Everything that I have is yours and your friends. It's a facility we don't work with. I don't care. Right. They've got a question they think I can answer. I'm never going to get that contract for whatever reason. I don't care. Just call me. I will help. And as often happens, the effort to try to do something good gets repaid 1,000 times over. I've been shown kindnesses and given opportunities that I never even imagined. And all I was trying to do was just do the right thing in the heat of the moment. And people recognized and remembered that and have been very, very kind to me and all of us at Guardian.
Yeah. Will, I want to circle back to what you talked about on MedPass. Several years ago, my pharmacy went over to the short cycle, multi-dose pouch, and I worked for a company that owned their own nursing homes and owned the pharmacy. We saw the benefit on MedPass, a pretty significant benefit of decrease in MedPass, 20, 25, 30% in some cases. And in a nursing shortage world, that was very important to us. And we had a lot of success with that. But I see some parts of the country, New York being one of them, that never have adopted short cycle pouch. That's still kind of mostly unit dose blister card MedPass. Have you had any experience with short cycle and helping with MedPass?
Yeah, absolutely seen it. It's blossoming more, like you said. New York is slow on the uptake. Seen much more of it, blossoming out in Connecticut in recent years, and Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and then certainly as we head south. But New York, for whatever reason, a little bit slow on the uptake. I think that there is generally there's two things you're fighting. One is inertia, and two, that New York skepticism. All right, let's see if this really works before things start. That might be some of it. It's hard to explain why things pick up in certain areas and don't pick up in others. So it is sort of a curious phenomenon. But I would agree with your assessment. That's exactly what we've seen.
Do you think along those lines? I think we're seeing a lot of activity up here around technicians or I don't even know if we could call it CNAs actually being part of the MedPass process, which would lend itself to if we're going to pass meds, maybe we let them pass the solid oral tablets and capsules. Obviously, we're not going to
especially in a barcode.
We're not going to turn an IV
pouch
or an injection over to a technician level person, but we might turn some of these tasks over because we're really in a desperate situation. As it relates to that, from a pharmacist perspective, Will, can you point to anything that your pharmacists are doing today that they weren't doing prior to the pandemic that speaks to this stepping in? And one example I'll give, and I know that not a lot of people are doing this, but I don't think it's too far out in the future where the pharmacist might be responsible for some of the med monitoring assessments that used to belong to the nursing staff. And one example would be performing Ames tests or some sort of monitoring for psychoactive medications or antipsychotics. I could see that being something that we ask pharmacists to do and maybe even create pathways for reimbursement for that. But what kinds of things are you seeing spawn from this staffing crisis?
So two things on this. First, getting nurses off the unit for education is almost impossible these days. So what we did was we created a webinar bank on all of the topics that we typically in-service the staff so that they can watch the webinars at their convenience. Second, you're exactly right. The move to have people that have a lower level of licensure than, say, an LPN pass meds is clearly afoot. And it's clearly due to the staffing shortage. And I want to stress this. This creates a tremendous need and opportunity for consultant pharmacists to do what we do as well as anybody else, which is educate. And we have to be there in this critical moment, making sure that if we're going to approve, say, CNAs to actually pass solid oral tablets and capsules, that they've gotten proper education on what it is to do that properly. And we're in the prime position to do this. I mean, we've gotten more requests for MedPass observations in recent months as the pandemic has hopefully come to a close here. Then I think it's just more than ever. Let's put it that way. And with this move to have unlicensed people actually pass meds, that need for MedPass observations and MedPass teaching is only going to grow. And we're going to have to take the language and say, okay, we've got to take that same language that we're using on this and translate it for a different audience that doesn't have the advantage of having gone through nursing school. And how do we make sure that they understand the message that we're giving and actually rework some of the teaching tools that we've put together for a new audience that's going to be caring for our frail elderly and our rehab patients?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought process as we move over to those CNAs or whoever else passing meds, that's going to have a bigger need for consultant pharmacist. How about transitional care? I know some parts of the country, many long-term care pharmacies are very good at doing a follow me home or discharge with meds. It seems like that's been kind of not happening in New York as rapidly, or maybe you can educate me that it is, but it seems like that they're slow to adopt that. But with the rehospitalizations being a hot topic for the last 5 years, and that affecting the nursing home's reimbursement directly, and also affecting their 5-star ranking and 5-star rating, I should say, as much help with that transition to care and keeping them out of the hospital, the better. I've seen long-term care pharmacies come alongside their nursing centers upon admission and really help them through that process to make sure that when it's time to discharge, they're discharging with meds, and that long-term care pharmacy is continuing to stay with that patient up until that 30 or 90 days after discharge. First of all, my question is have you seen that program? Do you have any advice for pharmacies as far as being able to adopt that program and start using that in your space, in your area?
So I've seen a lot of people attempt to get these up and running. A lot of it has to do with staff turnover and personnel. Like, you no sooner get the social work team and the discharge planners on the facility side educated on what they need to do in order to effectively use the program for that particular pharmacy, then those people are gone, and now the program basically falls apart. And now they're starting up again. So I think that as the turnover situation begins to settle down, and it will, as that begins to settle down, this will gain steam because it has to. It's absolutely the right thing to do on every level, to make sure that we're following, that there are some checks on, all right, your refills are due. How come you got so many left? All those things that really need to happen. Will definitely happen, but I think it's being hampered very much, from my eyes, from my seat, by how much turnover has gone on at the facilities right now. There's also the other side of it, which is it makes our new admission drug regimen reviews for those short-term residents even that much more critical. I talk to my staff about this all the time. We have one good shot with most of these people to identify that drug that is not necessary and get it out of the way, or identify that drug that's not being monitored properly and make sure that it is, or identify that drug that's being used in an improper dose based on age, weight, renal function, presence of side effects, and get that corrected. And if we don't get it done, and that person goes home on that, what amounts to an unnecessary drug, a drug that, and we all know what happens here. The reality is that, and I've told any number of audiences, of professionals to non-professionals, the same line. There's only two things that a drug can do if it's unnecessary. It can do basically nothing, or it can hurt, but it can't help. There's nothing about it that can help. If you're lucky, it does nothing. In most cases, that unnecessary drug hurts. So, and that's really where our role is. Somebody comes in, they're on that drug, the renal function is not going to support it. You've got to get that fixed right then, right there. They come in on that drug is no longer necessary. It should not have been sent with the discharge papers, but it somehow made it over from the hospital. A hospitalist wrote that order, and they sent it over to the nursing home, and that drug that was intended to be stopped when they were discharged from the hospital doesn't get stopped. We've got to pick up those, and we've got to get those done. Now, the sidelight for the facilities is the facilities are all on board with this. They're passing fewer drugs. They've got fewer rehospitalizations due to medication misadventures. And primarily, those people coming in on those short-term stays are paying out of pocket. So we get a lot of support from administration when I'm talking about this with groups of medical staffs. And my staff is talking about this at the medical staff meetings. It's one more way where, it's one of these everybody wins situations. And Tom, as you and I have talked about, how I love, win-win-win situations. When everybody wins, we're all better off.
That's right.
All right, let me ask one last question, but it's probably the broadest and biggest question. Probably the reason I took this role at ASCP. We've got 20 million more people coming in the next 5 years that will land in the over 65 age group. We have a flat number of skilled nursing home beds. It's been flat for 25 years. So, if you look at the statistics, a person over the age of 65 puts their head down in a nursing home on a pillow. 4 million of them do that a year. A lot of them are custodial. There's a good percentage of those that are transitional. If those numbers hold, that number, instead of 4 million, is going to be 6 million in 2030, which means, by and large, these individuals that are in nursing homes today are going to be in assisted living, and they're going to be in the community tomorrow. Those scenarios don't always have the pleasure of a consultant pharmacist. Where do you see consulting pharmacy going and following these vulnerable people that we could even argue today there are people in the community that desperately need consultant pharmacist services, but they don't have access or there aren't paths to get there? But what do you see in the future as we head down this road?
So, Chad, we could do about 2 hours on this topic.
Right? I told you it was a big last question.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great.
Get the 5-minute version.
So the 5-minute version basically goes like this. There will be an expansion in the number of long-term care beds because there's going to have to be. At some point, there's going to be an overwhelming need. But as you point out, there is also going to be this overflow, which is going to end up in assisted living or in the community. Two things on that. One, we as a group need to go back and say, look, we need to play a larger, better, more clinical role in the assisted living arena than we are. Now, sporadically in various states, we're doing better or worse job. Sure. There needs to be something much more uniform across the country where we can go in and do the right thing by these people so that they are able to take all the advantage of assisted living, everything that assisted living has to offer, and have the best quality of life and not end up transitioning to some more intense level of care unnecessarily or much too soon, much sooner than they would have otherwise needed to be. That's number one. Number two, I am so excited about what AI is going to allow us to do going forward in terms of looking at things for the community, in terms of the predictive ability of where we're going to have problems, and then being able to work backwards, possibly with the insurers, to say, all right, you allow us to leverage what we know as consultant pharmacists and all of the lessons that we have learned in long-term care and to an extent in assisted living, and apply this using AI into certain environments, in certain subclasses of patients that have high likelihood of rehospitalization. And we can, the amount of good that can come of this is amazing. And I'm telling you, it's something, I wake up in the middle of the night thinking up various scenarios of how this would work out. And I'm telling you, Chad, I've got a few. It's 2 hours worth of discussions, but I've got it.
We'll do it again. We'll do it again.
We will do it again. So we could have a whole thing just on AI and the possibilities, not just for consultant pharmacists as we exist now, but what it means for us in the future.
That's awesome. And I like that healthy attitude toward AI. There's so much doomsday discussions, but really these are tools, and they can only amplify what we do. Especially if we leverage them properly. So I love that attitude.
It is refreshing to hear. There's a lot of anti-technology, anti-AI out there, and I think it's just a false fear. But I got the more important question. You grew up in Long Island. Is it Mets or Yankees? Where's your allegiance lie?
I'm born and bred a Yankees fan. Yankees, I can't even, I'm a Yankees fan so long I don't even remember, becoming a Yankees fan. I'm just born that way. And so Yankees, New York Giants, and the Yankees, that's
how it goes.
where my allegiance are. Yep, we'll see how it goes.
All right.
And then Rangers as well? Is that how it went, Rangers over Islanders?
Yeah. That is the typical,
yeah.
That's Yankees, Giants, Rangers, Mets, Jets, kind of Islanders kind of a thing. That's those are sort of the way things are mostly divided. There's some crossover, but mostly that's the way things go around here.
Well, Will, I want to thank you for being on today. we call these episodes pillars of the industry, and you are for sure a pillar of our industry. And it's 4th of July week. You're a great American. We appreciate you being generous with your time and helping share your story so that consultant pharmacists all over the country can engage this profession and be better and do better. So thank you very much for being here.
Hey, Chad, Tom, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's great talking to you guys.
All right.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week on a new episode of Our Experience.